Hello, good people of the world. I'd like to quote the philosopher and poet one Jay-Z and say, you could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with me. I appreciate that. And would like to talk about something a little bit different today. So I am not what I would consider a truck guy, have never owned a pickup or any sort of truck-like vehicle in my driving career. I'm also definitely not a Ford guy, have never owned a Ford product at any point in my driving career, and my only experience with driving Fords has been having some of them as rental cars in various countries. Yet despite all that, all of a sudden I found myself with a Ford F-150 pickup truck that's hopefully in production somewhere in the greater Dearborn area, and also a reservation for a Ford F-150 Lightning, which is their brand new electric truck. And unless you've lived under a rock or just have no interest whatsoever in the automotive press, or in this case, even the general press, you've probably heard about the Lightning. I know that several of the people that follow this channel are into car camping, or if you want to be fancy and make it sound a lot more impressive, overlanding, as I am. Several of you probably have families, as I do. I have 3 children that are growing up, and we frequently are involved in outdoor sports from, again, car camping, bicycling, Boy Scouts, and all sorts of stuff like that. So my previous vehicle of choice was generally a small sedan. Most of my time was spent driving to and from the airport or running errands. My wife has a large minivan and we use that as our family vehicle. Having one small car and one minivan just wasn't cutting it anymore. So I've had EVs or electric vehicles for my last 2 cars. 2 cars ago I had a BMW i3, which is sort of their funny looking little compact carbon fiber electric vehicle that was kind of interesting and different, probably most notable for having the suicide doors where the rear doors flipped out in the opposite direction. My most recent car was a Chevy Bolt. If you're unfamiliar, it looks kind of like an Econobox. It was their first pure electric vehicle, or lovingly described by most owners as essentially a $15,000 Econobox sitting on top of a $30,000 battery, which I don't think is a completely unfair description. And with the Bolt, just to give you a little history, I had bought that to kind of tide me over to the next big thing in electric vehicles. And if you followed electric vehicles for any meaningful amount of time, you've probably suffered from the same syndrome that I have, in that the cool vehicle that you really want, that's really exciting, is perennially 2 years down the road. So when I bought my BMW, or I actually leased it for 2 years under the assumption that in 2 years there'd be all these fabulous vehicles available to choose from. Of course, that didn't pan out, and it was basically just Tesla and a few half-hearted efforts from other companies. I bought the Bolt under the assumption that I'd have that for a couple or 3 years, and then there'd be all manner of incredibly cool and compelling vehicles available. 2 years into it, all that's really available is Tesla, although to their credit, they went from one vehicle with the Model S to having the Model X to having the 3 and the Y. So, EVs, you're always waiting for the next cool vehicle and the next big battery breakthrough. Folks that are new to following EVs are probably all excited and have been doing some reading up on them and found out, 2 years from now, we're gonna have batteries that cost 18 bucks, hold 6 bazillion amp hours of fuel, and essentially have a 10,000 mile range on a single charge that takes 6 seconds. Join us for a few years and you'll suddenly find yourself changing your tune, because that type of news seems to pop up every few weeks, and these magical battery revolutions never seem to quite materialize. So with my Bolt, I planned on keeping that for several years, and what was interesting was GM ultimately ended up recalling the Chevy Bolt. There were a few vehicle fires that occurred while they were charging. In one case, it created significant damage to somebody's house. GM came out with kind of a temporary solution that limited your ability to charge the battery. Concurrent with that, they also offered buybacks. So you had to go through all kinds of paperwork and go through various machinations to ultimately get it executed. But after about 8 weeks, I got them to do a buyback of my vehicle, turned it in, got a check, and it essentially was a fairly financially lucrative deal. Maybe I'll go into the specifics in another video if there's interest in that, but I think that buyback program has ultimately expired since they have a permanent fix. It basically got me out of the vehicle with relatively little financial penalty, and I started looking for my next vehicle. And I was relatively sure I wanted to go with an electric vehicle again. In this case, it was basically Tesla. There were a few others. Volkswagen has a new SUV out. Audi has an SUV out, Jaguar. So a few other options, but not too many. And I test drove the Model Y. Tesla, I kind of have mixed feelings on Tesla. And again, maybe this is a video for another time, but on one hand, they've done incredible things for innovating in electric vehicles. They've, done things that no one thought could be possible for an electric vehicle startup, let alone just a general startup entering a century-old industry and disrupting and kind of poking a lot of the legacy automakers and getting them to do things that they probably never thought they'd do on the timeline or scale that they're executing them now. And I looked at the Model 3, it was a little too small for our family, looked at the Model Y and kind of had mixed feelings on the vehicle. There's a lot of rumors of quality problems with them, everything from bumpers falling off to panel gaps, and if you type Tesla Model Y into the Google machine, you'll probably see 700 articles, good and bad. People are very passionate about the vehicles, both pro and con, but just seemed like there were sort of some Mickey Mouse quality type issues. The service network isn't quite there. Wasn't quite big enough to get my family of 5 in on a road trip in their current state, and obviously at least 4 of us are expanding. Kind of okay company, kind of okay, maybe a little small in terms of size. I'm not a huge fan of it's been described as kind of the Scandinavian or minimalist interior. To me, it's kind of a low cost way of producing a vehicle by just stripping out all the buttons and trying to put everything in the screen, which for some functions worked great. For a lot of functions, I don't know if I want to be poking around trying to turn my wipers on to intermittent when there's a big rainstorm or something like that. And driving it around, I took it on a couple test drives. You mash the gas, the thing, flies. Everyone gets Tesla face and giggles and makes for great videos. But I don't find myself in a situation where I need to go from 0 to 60 in 3 seconds all that often. What I do find myself in is needing to haul a bunch of gear, haul a bunch of kids around, maybe do a little bit of light off-roading to get to a campsite on a scouting trip or something like that. My wife, being the brilliant person that she is, said, why don't you check out Jeeps? Why don't you check out trucks? Why don't you kind of color outside of your preconceived EV box a little bit? And so I did, and I took my 2 boys just on a lark over to the Dodge dealer. We went out in a Ram 1500. We all loved it. The thing was spacious. It was at a level of luxury I frankly didn't expect. The only pickup trucks I'd been in were a few friends' work trucks. I'd had pickups as rentals a few times, and generally rental vehicles are sort of the lowest example of the line that you can get. But this thing, I think, was kind of a mid or upper tier Ram. It was nicely appointed, had leather, felt nice, looked good, drove really nice. The suspension was well executed. It didn't feel like the bouncy old truck I was kind of expecting. Had great acceleration. We didn't have the salesperson with us, which was a COVID-related thing, which I would qualify as a feature more than a bug, quite frankly. And we got on the highway, gave it a little gas just to make sure it could get out of its way as we were going on the on-ramp, and the V8 makes a whole bunch of noise. The boys are all in the back screaming, and we were kind of hooked at that point. We drove that Ram, Ford dealership across the street, went over, saw the new F-150. I think the interior is as nice, in some ways a little better, in some ways a little worse than the Ram. Technology, I think, exceeds that of the Ram, and frankly, I would say, and Tesla fans are probably going to throw a rock at me right now, I think the technology in the Ford actually exceeds the Tesla. Their self-driving tech is coming out this summer, so the jury's still out on that, but they have Apple CarPlay, they have the wireless version of that. Tesla refuses to let anyone else connect to their infotainment system, so no Apple CarPlay, no Android Auto. You're kind of stuck with what the good people at Tesla decide to give you. Basic things like AM/FM radio, integrated towing brake controller, all sorts of gadgets, a legitimate blind spot warning system versus Tesla's kind of hokey thing that flashes a little beeper on the screen, an actual dashboard. So people that love the minimalist style of Teslas love it. People that maybe don't like it, but thought the F-150's interior was great. The overall vehicle was nice, plenty of room for the family, had the obvious addition of having a bed so we could put stuff in there and haul and do my construction projects and take the kids camping and bring all their bicycles and all that good stuff. So essentially was hooked, and that kind of cemented my voyage from never owning a pickup truck, putting a reservation in on the F-150. Little did I know there would be a semiconductor shortage that would now delay the vehicle several weeks. Placed an order, it's in the queue, found a dealer that's provided very reasonable pricing, and if they're willing to, I'll see if I can do a little video of the pickup experience of that. All this is to say, while I was waiting for the semiconductor shortage, Ford announced the Lightning. Probably like everyone, it exceeded my expectations. I think they really hit the combination perfectly of conventional F-150 pickup truck and taking all the things that people love about pickup trucks and taking all the good of electric vehicles and kind of mashing it together. So you have this enclosed, lockable storage. They put a few power outlets up there. You've got the traditional pickup truck bed. There's also power outlets back there. So what's particularly interesting about the Lightning is it's the first vehicle that I'm aware of that's going to be commercially distributed at scale that incorporates vehicle-to-grid technology. So what that means is essentially it's kind of what it sounds like. So it's the vehicle providing electricity back to the power grid. So if you think of a typical electric vehicle, you plug it in, it charges, electricity goes from the grid into the large battery inside the vehicle, and then you drive around and hopefully live happily ever after. In the vehicle-to-grid scenario, you charge it as you typically would, but then the vehicle can also provide power back into the grid. In Ford's case, what they're showing with the Lightning is that the vehicle can power your home in the case of a power outage, and they have a special charger that's presumably bi-directional. Presumably it'll disconnect your home from the grid since you don't want to power the entire grid with just your truck. But what's interesting is this allows for a whole bunch of possibilities. If you think about most vehicles, they maybe drive around in the morning for a commute, maybe you're running errands, they kind of sit idle at night, and you combine that with power grid usage, which is kind of variable as well. It has this sort of funny curve based on when people are awake, and there's kind of a demand spike at the end of the day as everyone's going home and doing their evening routines. You could use a whole fleet of vehicles that are connected to the grid to potentially even out that demand volume. You could use it for disaster recovery. You could use it for things like if there was an overcapacity situation, vehicles could potentially feed energy back into the grid. There's all sorts of different pricing you could do there. So kind of limitless possibilities. And to my knowledge, no one's really figured out all the nuances of this, how you price it, how you charge for it, who pays for what. Do I get a credit from the electric company if my car is essentially serving as a large battery for the utility? But Ford is pushing the envelope here, and that's pretty cool. Ford's the first to actually do that, and frankly, I think they deserve some kudos for starting to push this technology and push this new approach to power generation out in the world. This is awesome that Ford, particularly a company that's arguably one of the leaders in the truck space, is doing something new and something different and something that they knew would ruffle some feathers. Although I think they did the similar thing with the Mustang, which, again, if you're a purist, it's just another SUV, it's electrically powered, it sort of breaks all the sacred elements of what makes a Mustang, and Ford kind of said, we don't care, we're going to do it anyway, and apparently from what I've seen in recent sales numbers has met a lot of success in that area. So what am I going to do having two Fords, one on order and hopefully, as you're watching this, is being assembled in Dearborn, Michigan, and having a reservation for the Ford Lightning truck? Well, my plan is pretty simple. So hopefully I will be receiving that Ford in the next few weeks. Again, if the dealer that gave me the deal that they did is up for it, I'll try and do a little video on that and share some numbers and share the experience. Just to give a little teaser, the deal was so good I'm going to jump on a plane and then drive about 1,200 miles to get the truck back to my home. But hopefully I'll be getting that truck soon, and basically my number one goal is to see if I can handle truck life. The things I'm concerned about are I'm going from a relatively small vehicle that's easy to park, super easy to drive in the city, almost like tooling around in a large golf cart to some extent that can actually function on the highway, to a pretty big vehicle. When I hop in my wife's minivan, parking becomes a challenge. I have to be more aware of how much space I'm taking up. It's just sort of a bigger hulking and moving mass. You'll get the same thing in a pickup truck, obviously. So seeing if that works for me, seeing if all the benefits that I imagine around towing, around hauling stuff, around being able to get all the kids in the car materialize, or if it's just me rolling to the airport in a vehicle that's a bit excessive for that application. So that's kind of piece number one. And assuming that truck life works for me, piece number two is, is the F-150 the right place for truck life? I think a lot of the technology is fairly similar between the Lightning and the standard F-150. There's some interior differences. There's obviously kind of more of a big tablet on the dash versus the gas-powered F-150 has kind of more of a traditional screen, but they both do have that generator capability where the engine in the hybrid version can actually power a device in the bed of the truck that, in the vehicle I ordered's case, puts out above 7 kilowatts of electricity. So essentially the car kind of serves as a rolling generator. In the case of the Lightning, it can put out, I believe, an equivalent or maybe a little more power, but you don't have to have that gas engine running to generate that power. It's strictly pulling off of the battery, which would be kind of interesting. You could have that thing parked in your garage in the dead of winter and connected to your house and powering your house, which obviously you wouldn't want to do with a gas vehicle or a gas generator due to the risk of carbon monoxide. So pretty interesting from either front. And I think the other kind of split decision or fork in the road is how much towing I'm going to do. So I have this grand vision of getting an off-road trailer and doing all these big adventures with the family in the woods of the Southeast here, and hopefully ultimately out to the west and southwest, and going to the desert and setting up camp in these remote locations and doing all sorts of awesome, amazing things and producing YouTube videos with drones and epic music and all that cool stuff. The big question is, will those dreams pan out, or will I be sitting around tooling to and from the airport and the occasional trip to the woods without ever towing anything? If I'm towing all the time, that may be a split and bias towards the hybrid and staying with that gas capability, at least for the next couple of years until charging infrastructure comes out a bit. Or if I'm not towing that much or towing locally and the towing doesn't impact the range too much, then that may be a pretty strong case to move up to the Lightning. So hopefully in the next couple of weeks, I will be sharing my adventure on picking up a F-150. I've got the Platinum Powerboost. I think I got all that right. Powerboost is kind of their funny code word for a turbocharged V6 hybrid motor that I think gets around 12-ish miles of electrical power on any given tank of fuel. So that should be interesting, still keeping with a little bit of the EV flavor in this vehicle. We'll see how truck life works. We'll see how the F-150 and the Ford brand treat me. And assuming all that goes well, then sometime in 2022, we may be rocking the electric truck. So hopefully this was helpful. If you're on the fence on, do you go truck? Do you put in a Lightning reservation? Maybe you too are coming from the sedan or small compact vehicle way of life and thinking about moving to a truck. So hope you enjoyed this and look forward to your comments, your thoughts. If you'd like, mash the subscribe button, give it a like, and we'll see you out there on the road. Peace.